Mr. Minister, would you like to start? No, fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could please have your attention, please. Our session is going to begin momentarily. If we could kindly ask the room to quiet down and maybe close the doors. If we actually have people at the door, if we could close the door and limit the entry into this room while we're having the session. Thank you very much. Arkadaşlar kapıyı kapayabilir misiniz lütfen? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you all to this edition of ADF Talks. In just a moment, we're going to be having hopefully a very candid discussion, a one-on-one discussion with one of the world's most influential figures in international diplomacy. You know, as Russia's longest-serving Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Sergei Lavrov has navigated the intricate web of international politics with not only finesse, but also with unwavering determination. I'm hoping that over the next 30 minutes or so, I'll be looking to delve a little bit deeper into some of your personal insights, sir. Talk about some pressing issues that our world is facing and some of the intricacies that have helped shape your unparalleled career. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Russian Federation, Mr. Sergei Lavrov.
Thank you.
Mr. Lavrov, welcome back to the Anti-Diplomacy Forum. It's good to have you back. It's a pleasure and it's an honor. I'd like to begin by asking you your very broad assessment, something from 30,000 feet, of the current geopolitical situation. We are in a world where the balance of power is changing, the world order is changing, we're seeing the decline of perhaps globalization, a move towards a multipolar world, maybe an increased importance of smaller groups that had previously been neglected.
Well, thank you very much for your welcome and for the respect to the emerging multipolarity. I would speak Russian.
Okay.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, я нажал.
It is on, actually.
Вот он горит, вот, пожалуйста. Еще что-нибудь сделать?
Red light means on.
Надо, нет? They believe I am stupid, you know. Уважаемые дамы и господа, во-первых, хочу поблагодарить турецкие власти за приглашение на Анатолийский форум. Я был здесь 2 года назад. В прошлом году, к сожалению, не удалось нам собраться из-за катастрофы, которая постигла Турцию. Было страшное землетрясение. Россия немедленно направила своих спасателей, необходимое медицинское оборудование, гуманитарную помощь. Сегодня президент Эрдоган вспоминал о том периоде. Многополярность – это действительно реальность сегодняшнего дня. Не потому, что кто-то вдруг решил бросить вызов Западу, а просто потому, что естественный ход событий, прежде всего в сфере экономического развития, вывел на авансцену новые, крупные и мощные государства. Ну, у всех на слуху Китай и Индия, рост экономики которых рекордный, которые...
Huge, it's very fast, and they are discovering new modern technologies. For example, nowadays China is called a long-term challenge by the US government. They are considered to be a challenge for the US, but mentioned that China has reached today's results playing by the rules invented by the Americans with the support of other Western countries without the context of globalization, liberal market and honest rivalry and honesty in general. And when they do that, based on the rules and institutions that they've created, for example, International Monetary Fund, International Trade Organization, and others, China is growing faster and faster, and China is stronger than them right now. And then they started to block the work of the International Trade Organization, and they have a lot of complaints, and these complaints are lawful complaints. We can see that there are some changes in the votes and quotes in the international funds, and we know that BRICS countries, if we consider the initial rules, those countries are supposed to have more votes, but it's not the case right now. So the USA have their blocking vote, but no, it's not working this way. And we should pay attention to the fact that of the liberal market were crossed out just at once when the United States decided to punish Russia for the fact that our Western colleagues about the catastrophic consequences of the widening of NATO to the east, of adding new countries, and we warned them that all those actions were unacceptable. The regime was unacceptable. You know that there was a change in the regime in 2014 in Ukraine. The regime changed, and they decided to destroy everything Russian, the education, the language, the culture, everything. If you talk to someone in Russian in Ukraine, in a shop, in a grocery store, they can decide not to provide services to you. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that English is forbidden in Ireland, for example, or French is forbidden in Switzerland, or German is forbidden in Switzerland? Nobody can even imagine that. That's impossible. But in Ukraine, all these things were done because people listened to the Western countries, and we applied to them. We wanted to put it back to order. We wanted to control the situation. We wanted to cancel these discriminatory actions because they don't even follow the constitutional rules of Ukraine, because it's written there that it's very important to respect the rights of Russians. It's even written like that, Russians and other. Today, President Erdogan and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, esteemed Fidan, said that there is a big crisis in the international rule of law, and the processes are disrupted. And we talked about different examples, but Palestine and Ukraine were the most common examples mentioned during those talks. And you know that all the mess that we can see in the world right now actually exists. All of us know it, but who is to blame here? The UN? I'm not sure. In case of Ukraine, the UN has done its job. And when the parties of the conflict in Donbass, after coup d'etat, and after February 2015, signed an agreement with a guarantee of Germany and France, the Security Council of UN accepted that agreement. They adopted it, they adopted the resolution, and they made it mandatory. And now we know that At the beginning, these agreements, nobody wanted to fulfill them. Everybody used to sign them except for President Putin, but they didn't want to apply them, didn't want to implement them. They just wanted to win time to send a lot of weapons to Ukraine. Those weapons were supposed to be used against Russia, and that was the case. That was true. All the things that you can see now supports the initial plan, and it shows us that there can't be any. They say that we should go to we should continue with Russia. That's what they say, and we know that NATO representatives had plans to establish their base on the Russian culture in the country. Those lands, those fields, those cities where Russians used to live, Russians used to build infrastructure, roads, ports, etc. It's not the fault of the international society, no. The charter looks like an ideal document for today, but there is a principle of the West. It says that the UN is based on the rights of the countries. Can you give me an example of the conflict after the establishment of the UN where the participants of the process were equal? That was never the case. And as you can see, Minsk agreements, resolutions on Ukraine, were also important in this process because the Western countries didn't consider Russia to be the country to be respected. And it was just in time. And a small part of the eastern part of Ukraine would have a right to speak Russian and teach their children in Russian and have their own police force, local police force. And they were supposed to be consulted when prosecutors and judges appointed. That was the initial plan. And it's the same the things that now he wants to provide the same things to Corsica right now. It's even smaller than the autonomy existing in other countries with minorities. If we talk about Palestine, it's very similar. General Assembly of UN Council, the things were all the same, but the decisions were sabotaged, and mostly it was done by the US, and they continued doing the same thing. They stopped working with the international media. Union, Russia, and the UN were among them, and they started launching some secret negotiations which nobody knows anything about. And I'm sure that Palestine will not get a legitimate country, but we will see some like Palestine has been accepted to the UN, for example. It will be a good picture, but status quo won't change. One more example for you. The policy of the US and their allies in Taiwan. They say that they accept united China, but you can describe the relationship with Taiwan with Taiwan as a country, and so the problem is the basis of the UN. The problem is that the Western countries don't implement the decisions.
Sorry for the slight delay, I was just waiting for the translation. Minister Lavrov, you talked about a lot. U.S. policy, NATO expansion eastward, the situation in the United Nations, Macron's comments, the situation in Gaza. We're going to get into all of that. But I specifically want to ask you, because the tone that I seem to have gotten from your opening remarks is it's action-reaction. I want to find out a little bit more where you see Russian foreign policies taking the country. Where do you see it? If you could paint me a picture in 10 years, where is Russia as a result of its foreign policy?
In the middle of this.
You know, President Putin, by the way, I think it's the middle. The answer is in the middle. Yesterday, President Putin message to the federal. So he explained our today's philosophy. For many years, the collapse of the USSR, of the Soviet Union, and modern Russia went through its establishment process. We believed in the things that the West promised us. We believed that everything will be okay. We believed that there are no rivals, there are no enemies. We are all in the same boat. We will be honest, work together for the common good. But it turned out that all of that was fiction. There are no equal rights. We didn't feel anything in the economic relations with the West. We tried to join the trade organization, and the European Union drank a lot of our blood, I can say. There were a lot of Russia and the European Union because we were very big partners. However, all the economic steps, all the steps in were very problematic. And we were completely cheated on when we talked about security, equal security for everybody. This principle is written in a lot of decisions, in a lot of principles of security organization of Europe, OSCE, and since the summit, they talked about this principle, and the principle discussed numerous times on the highest level. And we saw in those principles that no country or a group of countries will try to dominate in the world. So with one hand, they were signing those promises, and with the other hand, they were signing their agreements, opening their territories, and breaking all the principles established in the OSCE. In Ukraine, I think you know how things happened in the country, how the regime changed, and how this regime was established by the U.S., and how they listened to the U.S. 100% to the USA. And we know that there are officers, there are British people, there are French people. Those people rule the country. We know all about them. And that's the result we have now. Because Minsk agreements were not implemented. And when we saw that, when we spotted that, one more time, we saw that it's impossible to get out of this crisis that Ukraine turned to be in its eastern parts. Because we used to think that it would have been possible to avoid the negative consequences twice during the period when NATO started widening territories and advancing. But then, let me tell you the dates. It was 2010 and December. During that time, the West rejected our offer. We offered them to apply the agreements, apply the political declaration on the highest level, and they rejected the offer. And we said that our relationship with Ukraine is not your business. So the best thing what can be done is some limitation of the missiles, long-range and middle-range missiles. Maybe we can talk about the limitations on their usage. That was the only thing discussed. Although that organization was the most important place where all those people initially made. That's why this structure, this organization it doesn't mean anything to us because we can't trust it, we can't rely on it, and the process of consensus is totally disrupted in this organization. Also, we see the people in power who take sides. And for many years in Ukraine, there were decisions made to destroy Russian culture, Russian education. During all those years, OSCE silent, just like the way they did for dozens of years before that, about Latvia and Estonia, about the non-citizens, ethnic Russians who voted for independence of those countries. They can't become the citizens of those countries. Do you know about that? Now they talk because they're technically Russian, but everybody keeps. And let's say we have an initiative, or let's say the perception of the reality that we see nowadays, the meaning of the cooperation on the participation of the countries, the participants of which are here today, and the basis for this process helps us establish the relationship, for example, between Shanghai Cooperation Organization, ASEAN, SHOS, and others. We see great perspectives here, and we think that, for example, the different organizations from Gulf countries, the League of Arab Countries, and other organizations from the Gulf countries can attend this process. It's useful for all of us. But if the other countries from the European Union see they're in a deadlock, maybe they will change their mind if they understand that they don't have any responsibility, they don't bear any responsibility, because they actually sacrifice their people, their nation, their citizens to the Ukrainian regime.
Так что евразийская безопасность – это естественный процесс. Тем более, что центр мирового развития сместился в Азиатско-Тихоокеанский регион, прежде всего в Южную, Восточную, Евразию. Сейчас
Western Eurasia is the engine of the development of the world right now. Europe has lost its role. That's the way we see the future.
Mr. Lavrov, at the beginning of your answer, you said, of course, Russia's at the middle. I'd like to point out that Turkey is actually, if you open up Google Maps, Turkey is in the center.
Но в Турции есть некоторые карты, которые...
When you open the map, you say that Turkey is just in its
You can see that there are some maps where they use the wrong colors to color Russian Federation, and the parts are wrong.
You briefly mentioned the French about 5 minutes ago. I want to ask you about a particular comment made by French President Emmanuel Macron at the beginning of the week. He said when it comes to the issue of Western troops on the ground in Ukraine, he said, quote, nothing should be off the table, nothing should be ruled out. The United States has subsequently come out, quickly denied this, saying that this is not on the table, as the UK and Germany as well. You were asked by a TRT World reporter about a couple of hours ago what your thoughts on this comment was. I believe that your remark was short and nonverbal. I was wondering if you could actually comment on how this series of words has played out from a Russian perspective and the reaction.
Да, конечно. И
Yes, thank you. Well, I didn't. I don't think he misspoke. Macron didn't misspeak when he said that his workers rushed to correct him. But the things that he said has a huge impact on the European Union and the whole community in the world. Everybody rejected his words, but the employees of the President Macron and the new Minister of Foreign Affairs started saying that that's not what he actually meant, and maybe we can send troops to Ukraine, but they won't fight. They will just teach and train someone, and it doesn't mean that there will be a war between Ukraine and Russia, but maybe there will be, who knows. That's what he said. But the fact of sending troops, or the desire to send troops officially, was spotted there. We saw that. We'll say unofficially, they're already there. And they have... we understand that long-range weapons of Ukraine wouldn't have been able to use against Russian cities. We know that. We have a lot of evidence there. But after all the comments, after the speech of the President Macron, he said today or yesterday maybe, he said that he stands his ground and he rejected the words you had, I guess. But no, the President said something like we are not going to fight, but Mr. Austin, the Minister of Defense, when he left the hospital, it's that if Ukraine loses to Russia, then NATO will have to fight against Russia. That's what he said, exactly. There is a quote. This is the meaning of the quote. The exact meaning is this. That's why the thing is, it's kind of serious here. And at the same time, they keep blaming us for sending weapons to states and our president. More. In Geneva, on the table, there is a joint project between Russia and China. It's an agreement about stopping rising space. It's forbidden to send weapons to the space, but the Americans block it. And then they started blaming us for that. And this is a very old game. When they wanted to cancel the agreement of anti-missile protection, then President Bush said, we have to fight against Iran and the North Korea. They have very scary weapons, which are a big threat to us, but that was a big mistake. But when they needed to cancel the agreement of medium-range and long-range weapons, they just did. But before doing that, they blamed us. And they said, you have those weapons already. And President Putin sent his statement to all the NATO members, and he said that it's in Kaliningrad. They said that it's in Kaliningrad Oblast, and Putin made a statement and invited all the NATO members and suggested that they send the experts to Kaliningrad Oblast to inspect what we have there. And he asked them to return the favor and allow our experts to visit Poland and Romania, where the American anti-missile systems were established, and they could be used against Russia, because those ones are also included in the mentioned agreement. So the NATO members didn't even want to talk about that. They said, no, you're breaking the rules, you're violating the agreement, we don't need to check anything, we know we are right. Well, so before canceling that agreement, they just said that Russia violated it first, although that was not the fact. And And the main people who violated that were from the Western countries. So I think that the Americans are trying to find some reasons to use their weapons in the space. Anyway, our president made a statement and he said that it was stupid. That's exactly what he said. And people who blame us for those military actions need to understand their responsibility, need to understand the population of the countries, the nations, understand what their presidents talk about. The presidents they vote for, by the way.
You made a statement of if Ukraine loses this war, then NATO will have to fight Russia. Earlier in the week, we have marked the second anniversary of what Russia has been calling a special military operation in Ukraine. When you look at the West's perspective, it's on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, saying that Russia has illegally invaded, blatantly disregarded the national sovereignty of a neighboring country. You know, at the beginning of this conflict, Russia had certain grievances and it had some certain objectives.